שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
Shana Tova, Gemara Chatima Tova. Temple Sholom is honored that you are spending Yom Kippur morning with us. I'm Rabbi Miriam Terlinchamp, and I'm joined by Rabbi Simon Stratford, Rabbi Dr. Gary Zola, Dr. Mark Bailey, Dr. Allison Acord, and musicians and readers from our Temple Sholom community. We know that this high holiday season is different, and so we are trying our best to meet you where you are. Bring a sense of normalcy and meaning to this season. You'll notice that during this service we practice physical distancing, and we are trying our best to adhere to safety protocols. We will be using Mishkan HaNefesh as our machzor, our prayer book for the high holiday season. If you have already bought, borrowed, or downloaded one, wonderful. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. You'll be able to follow along just fine. Wherever you're joining us from, we want to hear from you. Please let us know. Write us on Facebook, leave us a comment, drop an email. We're all in this together, and it helps to hear from you. Every Jew is different, and yet together we realize the oneness of our own faith. May this service offer you what you seek, strengthen your connection to your faith, and provide an opportunity for reflection and healing. We continue on page 176 with Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, אמן. בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון ויומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב וימרו, אמן. יהא שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילם עם כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא וימרו, amen.
We rise together as we continue with Baruch Hu on page 178, our call to worship.
Like an unbroken current, energy streams from the source, bathing the planet in light, calling forth life, movement, mind unfolding matter, the power to love, and we offer it back to you, our own creative energy, ever dreaming, building, shaping patterns out of chaos, searching out light in the darkness. Creation never ceases, not for an instant. All life is aglow with your light. All things draw sustenance from the source. Baruch atah Adonai, Yoser Hamarot. Our praise to you, Adonai, creator of the lights of heaven. We continue on page 186 with the Shema, the watchword of our faith.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Ve'afta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol avavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lektecha v'derech u'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam le'ohot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lahem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet. We continue on page 197. Who is like you among the silent, mute and inscrutable? You witness our pain. Once upon a time, the sea was split, and Israel marveled at your outstretched arm. How many have cried out since then? How many have sunk beneath the waves? Centuries of innocent blood, lives lost to hunger, war, to cruelty or indifference, and those who died with your name on their lips. And still they perish in distant lands, and still they languish on our chilly streets. Your creatures are drowning even now, so why should we sing? Ever silent, hiding out in history, you have your reasons, or so they say. You left us on our own, so let us give you leave. Withdraw into yourself, withhold your saving power, and we will live on memories of joy, and stubborn and stiff-necked, we'll cling to hope and gather strength to fight the pharaohs when we must, and hold fast to freedom and celebrate in song, and vow that we will never be among the silent. We continue with our Song of Freedom, Mi Chamocha, on page 196.
rise together for tefillah for Avot and Gevurot on page 198. As we continue on 174 with Untitled Chapter, I'd like to issue a trigger warning that for some of us, the next few pages have great resonance and meaning, and for others, the theology no longer serves us. In the center part of this prayer, we hear, how many will pass away, who by fire and who by water, who by war and who by beast. And if we could rewind this and think about last year at this time, could any of us have imagined that we'd be in this world? Could any of us have imagined we would see a pandemic of global proportions? Could any of us have imagined that we wouldn't be sitting side by side in a very hot space, wondering about what's happening? None of us could have imagined. And so what this prayer actually asks us to do is just surrender it. Surrender the fact that there is no such thing as predestination. There's no such thing as knowing the future. And maybe we already knew those things about ourselves. We knew we couldn't control things, but This year showed us that in a whole other way. So if it doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. And if it does, think about that last part, the uteshuva, that through atonement and residence and forgiveness, through self-understanding, through prayer, through our acts of loving kindness, that's how we make the future we have in this world. That's how we connect to God and receive it in that way.
Unatana Tokef. Today we call it by its rightful name, a day of dread. Nora Vayom, unwelcome visitor, for we want to live in a sunny world where God is love and all endings are happy. But the drumbeat sounds and the words tumble down, and even the angels tremble with fear, for all things are judged and all things pass, and life ends in a heartbeat in death. Know our name. At the start of the year, in the season of truth, comes the day of remembrance. For all we forget and all we deny, and we fall on our knees in depths of our hearts, for we know that the bell tolls for us. The words are old and the language was theirs, but the call is real and the message is ours. Take hold of your life while you still have the chance, for your story will end, and it might be this year in a way you don't know. Take hold of your life. Make things right while you can, and don't miss the call of the day of the dread.
On Rosh Hashanah this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur this is sealed. How many will pass away from this earth? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who will be tormented? And who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humble and who exalted?
Rosh Hashanah yikatevum uveyom Kippur yechatemun kama yavrun v'kama yibareun
continue on the top of page 214. Ut shuva, ut fila, ut tzedakah, ma'avirin et ro'ah hagzera. But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree.
Ut shuva, ut fila, ut tzedakah, ma'aviru et ro'ah hagzera.
We invite each of you to take a moment of silent prayer and reflection at this time. Whether you choose to follow the prayers provided for you in our prayer book through page 250 or choose to listen to the prayers of your own heart, let us each take a moment together.
Typically, during the high holidays, we greet each other with the words, Shana Tova, Happy New Year. But let's be real, we said that last year, and this year didn't turn out so great. I feel like our world has changed so much since last year that all the things we used to say to each other no longer really work. For instance, how you holding up is the new, how are ya? And you want to answer with the same cliche, I'm fine. It's all good. Cabin fever is better than the other fever. It could be worse. Fake smile, fake smile, fake smile. It's been 6 months of this, and for all of us, it's been hard, and so are we still obligated to answer with that same shallowness? Or is this the moment to engage more fully in our authentic expression of our mental, spiritual, and physical states with one another? The American cliche veneer of how we're supposed to check in with each other is failing, or at least it's failing me. When I call someone who is homebound with 3 little kids, or a new widow in a silent home, or the furloughed, the laid off, the underpaid, or the overworked in a stressful work environment, or the grandmother watching her daughter taking care of her daughter all through the window or a screen, or the recent graduate who doesn't get to move into her first new dorm room, or the groom whose wedding is rescheduled indefinitely, or when I call you after the funeral that you couldn't be at physically, watching the casket descend in the ground while you at home imagine the feeling of holding a handful of earth to place into the grave. How can we ask, how are you? This is a time when no words feel right. And many of us should say, I'm fine, while inside we might be feeling, I am drowning. I think many of us say, I'm fine, because we want so badly for all to be just fine. We want to be those Instagram moms who are cutely collaging together all the baby photos, or the Facebook cooking warriors who are pumping out masterful sourdough breads, or the hobbyists who discover that the thing they're doing just for fun is actually a multi-million-dollar startup that they just needed enough time to get it all started. But I want to let you in on a secret. Even those people aren't okay or fine all the time. This isolation, crazy pandemic time is not for the faint of heart. This is an existential war on the soul, and sure, we can have gratitude for the joy of slowed down time with children, for job security, for good health, but gratitude isn't the primary mindset for anyone 100% of the time, particularly when we are swimming in a sea of pandemic insanity. I like to think of gratitude as that really amazing yoga pose. You know, the one where your hands are on your elbows and your legs are scissored in the air, and after like 3 stream yoga classes, you're like, I can totally do that one, but then you realize you can't even touch your toes yet, let alone do an intensely acrobatic yoga power move, just for instance. Anyhow, it takes a long, long time to get beyond touching our toes, to work through the walls of anxiety and grief and suffering, and to get to a place where we can maintain a sense of gratitude for an extended period of time. So give yourself a break. Cry, scream at the walls, stretch your suffering throughout your body so that you can make room to build the muscle that's gonna keep you going for the next chapter of this very long pandemic. This pandemic may well have placed us in an unprecedented moment, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the tools to endure it. Yom Kippur is all about letting it all out. The intentional and unintentional sins, how and when we are forgiven by God and other human beings, and when we forgive ourselves. And if after all the beating of our chests, we hear the canonized guidelines passed from generation to generation to generations for thousands of years, and how we get through the worst of times. Be safe. Take care of the vulnerable. Cry your heart out, rend your clothes, dump ashes on your head, and then get up. Walk through the wilderness. Cross the sea, because there's a promised land somewhere on the other side. In our tradition, in the search of promised land, there are 3 miraculous river crossings. The first one happens in Exodus, where, fresh out of Egypt, the Israelites are running for their lives. The slave masters are chasing behind them, and the only thing between slavery and promised land is the river before them. God, with Moses' help, or Moses with God's help, depending on how you tell the story, splits the seas, and the people walk to freedom b'charava, on dry land. The second time is the book of Joshua. As the people carried the Ark of the Covenant into the Jordan River, the waters pile up in a single heap, and they stand on dry land b'charava as they cross. The third time, we're like, oh yeah, this miracle? Yeah, we know this, the dry ground thing. So it's in Kings, when Elijah the prophet needs to take his people across the Jordan River. And so he rolls up his coat, strikes the water, and voila, they cross, you guessed it, Baharava, on dry land. In each case, there's a river to be crossed, and the people are brought forward on dry land. In the word Baharava, the bet as prefix in Hebrew can mean two things. Either ba can mean on, as in on dry land, or the ba can mean in, as in the river. The faithful make it through treacherous crossings through water that would otherwise kill them by being in it. You can't make it through anything hard. You can't get to promised land, or even just the other side of whatever this mess is, unless you're in it. Before Joshua crosses that river, right after Moses dies and the mantle of leadership is handed to Joshua, God says to Joshua, "As I was with Moses, so will I be with you. I will not fail you, I will not forsake you. Chazak ve'amatz, be bold and brave." And then Joshua repeats those same words of comfort to the people. Things are about to get real, he says, but chamatz ve'amatz, be bold and brave. Why does God and then Joshua reassure their people with two similar words? Chazak strength is the boldness that comes from ego, the inner sense of being that lets you take a deep breath and then jump into the sea, knowing that the first plunge is going to be cold as all get out. Chazak is taking the first step and then having the courage to do something even when you don't fully believe in your own abilities yet. Amatz, bravery, is the vulnerable edge of courage, the part in us that gets that we're in it, and on either side are walls of terrifying water that things are not fine, but in order for things to change, we must find a way to move forward. Sometimes we see the change we know we need to make, but the very idea of having to walk through that river into certain pain and vulnerability stops us from moving forward. We want to believe that we can get to skip straight through the hardship into "I'm feeling fine" without doing the hard work of being in it. We want to be full of gratitude, but we don't want to do the hard work of letting go and being vulnerable enough to grow. Gratitude, grace, and being okay don't come naturally. They're wrested from the clutches of the crap that we go through in our lives. And once we process it, do the deep personal work, then maybe we move ourselves from the river to the promised land that we seek. I can't tell you that it'll be worth it, or that it'll all work out and be okay. But I can tell you my own experience of what I have seen, what our community of Temple Sholom modeled when we entered our own river of change and miraculously found ourselves Baharava on dry land. 6 years ago, our synagogue sold our building, and we took all of the money and invested it into a 5-year plan that included moving into a small, sweet, not very synagogue-looking office park. We were dying. So we jumped in the river and saw what we could do if we just gambled everything on our mission. We made a bunch of weird and fun artsy videos, and most people thought we'd close within a year. Instead, over the next 5 years, we saw a net growth of 65% in membership. We flipped our demographics and became young and queer, and then we just kept walking through that river. We reoriented our focus to be sourced in justice, got rid of dues and membership requirements. We invested in technology and online community, and now in a pandemic, we have very little overhead. We aren't cooling a 35,000 square foot building. The hobby of movie making gave us the skills to know how to film all of this. And 5 years ago, when we first jumped in the river, we looked crazy. We weren't sure we'd make it. It was just following our hearts. And now today, amidst a very different river, we look prescient, thriving. There was no telling what our dreams and hobbies and hopes would lead us to. It all depends on what side of the river you are seeing the story from. And I'd be lying if I said any of it was easy. If you told me how many martinis I'd be drinking in the shower while crying, I mean this literally, I bought a waterproof shelf for the glass, no exaggeration. If I had known how much of my soul would be required to lead that kind of change, I'm not sure I would have done it, even knowing the reward was so grand. We don't know what any river holds for us because there's always a price for being in something. Our inheritance as a Jewish people is both the river and the harav, the dry land, and it's our obligation to use our gifts to be in it so that we can deliver ourselves and others across the other side so long as the river will carry us. In this moment, promised land can mean lots of things. The way I imagine it is that promised land is a time-space moment where you breathe out in such a full and complete way that you realize and wonder that you've been holding your breath that whole time. Promised land looks like a sea of healthy people hugging and laughing, looks like dancing at a wedding, looks like privacy and space and touch. The high holiday season is supposed to reorient our focus by reminding us that maybe we've lost our way a little bit, got a little too much in our own heads, forgotten where we're heading, and now we need a realignment. So we atone, we forgive, we fast, we eat. This practice is called teshuvah, turning, and returning to our most authentic and holy selves. This is the way we try to find a taste of promised land, a hint of a redeemed world, an exercise where we stretch our psyche and spirit enough to get a glimpse of what's to come. This is really hard to do in isolation, praying from your couch as you stream. It's hard to be grateful, to feel redeemed, when we are worried for the people that we love, for ourselves, for the greater world. But this holy day wants us to stretch in both of our chazak, our boldness, and our amatz, our courageous hearts, and try to live into the moments of spaciousness, gratitude, and above all else, love. We already know that at the end of this pandemic, there's no normal to go back to. Inevitably, we will be forever changed by this moment. So we need to prepare now for the moment when it's all over, when we are through the river, cross on dry land, and we emerge outside no longer in fear. And I hope that the world we enter into is one that has reoriented itself around humanity, that what we pray for in ourselves and others and our greater world comes to fruition. We have so little control of what's happening right now, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. We have more power than we can imagine to heal, to hurt, to forgive, to take this holy season as an opportunity to reboot and stretch ourselves closer to promised land. We don't need to stand our heads just yet, but we can try to find the moments of joy that are given to us and that we are giving to the world, and then do it more, because really, we are just fine. Before we continue back to our prayer service, I want to thank our many chavarim, our supporters of Temple Sholom, who have sustained our congregation and given tzedakah through gifts of time, talent, and finances. We couldn't have made it through these many rivers without your unwavering generosity. If you're not part of the Temple Sholom community and would like to learn more, or are interested in becoming a financial partner in our ministry to help make services like this possible, please contact us. We'd love to hear from you. we rise together for Avinu Malkeinu, beginning on page 252. Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu Va'al Ol Aleinu V'Tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Dever V'Chara V'Ra'av Ma'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, hunger. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Kol Tsar Umasti Ma'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu Kotvenu Besefer Chayim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu Male Yadenu Mibrochatecha. Avinu Malkeinu, let our hands overflow with your blessings. Avinu Malkeinu Harem Keren Mishichecha. Avinu Malkeinu, let our eyes behold the dawn of redemption. Avinu Malkeinu Na'al Tishveinu Rekam Milfanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, we pray, do not turn us away with nothing. Avinu Malkeinu Kabel Berachamim Uvratzon Et Tipilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, welcome our prayer with love. Accept and embrace it. Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Imanu Leman Shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, act towards us as befits your name. Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Leman Chaim Lo Lemanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake, if not for ours. Avinu Malkeinu Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata. Avinu Malkeinu, you alone are our sovereign. Avinu Malkeinu Petach Sha'arei Shemaim Litfilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, let the gates of heaven be open to our prayers. Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu Hus V'Rachem Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, let our voice hear it and treat us with tender compassion. Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu V'Anenu Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim. Aseh Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting, and save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, V'al Alapeinu, V'Tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dever, V'Cherev Harav Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Chol Tsar U'Mastin Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu B'Sefer Chayim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chodesh Aleinu, Chodesh Aleinu. להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו.
I'm honored and humbled to welcome Dr. Rabbi Gary Zola, the Executive Director of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives and the Edward M. Ackerman Family Distinguished Professor of the American Jewish Experience and Reform Jewish History at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute Religion Cincinnati, and more importantly, or most importantly to us, beloved friend and congregant for a very long time. I thank you so much, Rabbi Zola, for all that you give to our community and for blessing us with your words of wisdom today.
Lishana mituka ufora, a sweet and fruitful year to one and all. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to be on Temple Sholom's bima during the High Holy Days, and this honor rises in significance this particular year when a world health crisis has compelled us to celebrate our holy days as a virtual congregation. To the entire Temple Sholom community, and especially to its dedicated leaders, and to those all around the world who are participating this year electronically, please accept my deeply felt wishes for a Shanat Shefa Uvarachot, a sweet, bountiful, and a blessed new year. A very special word of gratitude goes to Rabbi Terlinchamp, who graciously invites me to chant the morning's Torah portion and also to offer a few comments on the Torah portion we are reading on this day of decision, this Sabbath of Sabbaths, the Day of Atonement. Like all who are a part of this congregational community, we want to thank her for her dedicated spiritual leadership, her personal kindness, her unflagging commitment to that famous plank in Reform Judaism's historic Pittsburgh platform of 1885, which calls upon all of us to address, on the basis of justice and righteousness, the problems presented by the contrasts and evils of present-day organization of society. Our Cincinnati community is the grateful beneficiary of Rabbi Terlinchamp's many talents, and this year, an even larger virtual audience has been lifted up by the remarkable series of creative, genuinely moving online worship services that have made it possible for us to fulfill the call of our noble heritage in principle, if not in proximity. So, Rabbi, we wish you and Ryan, your children, and all those you love good health, much happiness, and blessings galore in 5781. Well, friends, shortly after Bob Hope's death in 2003, broadcast journalist Soledad Bryan interviewed the comedian's grandson, Zach Hope, who shared his famous grandfather's final words with TV viewers. Toward the end of my grandfather's life, Zach recalled, my grandmother leaned over his bed and gently asked him where he wanted to be buried. Hope opened his eyes, paused, and then whispered quietly, "Surprise me." Now, most final thoughts, of course, are not designed to make us smile. To the contrary, parting words convey oftentimes a sobering message of enduring significance or a profound lesson that enriches us here in the land of the living. It is said, for example, that Jimi Hendrix had been writing a poem or a song that was discovered lying next to him after his premature death. The poem's last line contained a thought that is particularly apt for these days of awe. The story of life, Hendrix had written, is quicker than the blink of an eye. On the morning of Yom Kippur, American Reform Jews read excerpts from Parashat Nitzavim, a portion from Deuteronomy that contains Moses' final thoughts. The prophet delivered these words just prior to his death, just as the Israelites prepared themselves to enter the Promised Land. More than a century ago, Reform Jews began to abandon the practice of using the traditional reading taken from Leviticus and chose instead to read Moses' last words, which challenge us to remember that human life is filled with existential, spiritual, and ethical choices. Now, according to the text, there is no grayness here. Our choices are stark and errant. Good or bad, blessing or curse, life or death, stand before us this day. After itemizing the opposite alternatives, Moses' rhetoric builds to a crescendo that climaxes with that familiar charge, Uvacharta b'chayim lama'an tichyeh. Therefore, choose life that you may live. A prominent American rabbi, Hillel Silverman, noticed the fact that there is a redundancy in the phrase, choose life that you may live. After all, if one chooses life, does not that assume we are already alive? So then why would the text insert those additional words, Lama'an tichyeh, so that you shall live? Perhaps, Silverman theorizes, this redundancy of phrase serves to remind us that existing and living are two very different matters. You see, when Moses urges us to choose life, he's not just advising us to keep breathing lest we expire. The real message in this clarion call, Uvacharta b'chayim, choose life, is actually revealed in the phrase that follows, Lema'an tichyeh, so that you will truly be living. It is not sufficient merely to exist. We are urged, with apologies, of course, to the Vulcan blessing, to live and to prosper. Well, this mandate is particularly daunting at this moment in time when life seems very dim and quite constrained. How does one thrive during these grim days filled with worries about a pandemic, worries about social upheaval, worries about political turmoil, and worries about environmental calamities? Can we thrive? Can we flourish? Can we live? Can we prosper at a time as bleak as today? Well, the world's dimness, its emptiness, seems to have trimmed our sails. It has curtailed our mobility. It has bridled our amusements. It has obstructed our communal gatherings. It has deprived us of handshakes and of hugs. Corruptio optimi pessima. The corruption of the best is the worst. Yet, today we read this remarkably forceful message on this singularly significant day of introspection for the very purpose of helping us to shake off our collective acquiescence and to exhort us never to succumb to the hazards of a half-hearted life. This is the preeminent challenge we are facing on this sobering annual observance. So how can we meet this challenge? One answer to that question comes from the final section of Moses' discourse. Zechor yemot olam, binu shnot dor vador. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Sha'al avicha v'yagedecha zikenecha v'yomrulach. Call on your ancestor, and you will be informed. Ask your forebears, and they will tell you. What does this verse mean? Well, Simon Dubno, the prodigious scholar of Jewish history, believed that there was inspirational value in examining the heroic legacy of our forebears. Dubno wrote, "Our wonderful, unparalleled past attracts us with magnetic power. The exhibition of the spirit triumphant, subduing the pangs of flesh, must move every heart and exercise uplifting influence upon the non-Jew, no less than upon the Jew." This history that we possess, the history of Jewish life here in America, it validates Dubno's contention. For our American Jewish forebears were people steeled in adversity, and they have bequeathed to us countless examples of what Dubno called the spirit triumphant, a spirit that can speak to us today. Consider the brief but heroic life of Walter Jonas Judah, an American-born Jew who studied medicine at King's College. Today, we call that Columbia University. He studied there from 1794 to 1798. Judah was one of the first identifiable Jews to attend medical school in New York in this country. In 1798, this is during the presidency of John Adams, a devastating yellow fever epidemic overtook the city of New York. This young medical student, he could have escaped New York, just as many others did. But as a student of medicine, he believed himself to be what today we would call an essential worker. So instead of fleeing or withholding his skills, Walter Judah joined in the effort to help the sick and the dying. He lies buried in Manhattan in the congregation's historic cemetery there. And if you go and visit his grave, you will find these words on his monument: in memory of Walter J. Judah, student of physics, who was worn down by his exertions to alleviate the sufferings of his fellow citizens in that dreadful contagion that visited the city of New York. Walter Judah is hardly the only example of Jewish altruism during a public health crisis in this country. If you ever visit the Capitol building of Colorado in Denver, you will see there a large window dedicated to the memory of Frances Weisbart Jacobs, a woman known as Colorado's Mother of Charities. Frances Jacobs battled the scourge of tuberculosis, and she cared for the afflicted in that city of Denver. Subsequently, she founded what would eventually be called the National Jewish Hospital in that same city. And then there is the example of Rabbi Max Samfeld of Memphis, Tennessee. He brought comfort to both the Jewish and the general community during a terrible yellow fever epidemic of the 1870s. And it was 2 decades later that Rabbi Henry Cohn stepped forward to serve all the citizens of Galveston, Texas, pastoring to them, just as Rabbi Samfeld had done in Memphis, Tennessee, in the aftermath of that great hurricane that devastated Galveston in 1900. The list of American Jews who were determined to do what they could to ameliorate the hurt and the heartache of America's public during the health crisis is much too long a list to recount in this context. Yet the common denominator that conjoins these few examples, and countless others that could be mentioned, is the manifest determination to overcome misfortune. We overcome misfortune by helping our neighbors and our friends. It's true, we cannot all hope to become Jonas Salk or Albert Sabin, but almost all of us do have the capacity, in one way or another, to lend a helping hand, to uphold those who are coping with loneliness, to bolster those who are anxious, and to support one another as together we face an inscrutable future. In an effort to explain the role her Jewish identity played in shaping her professional career, the late lamented Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Aleha Shalom, explained that the demand for justice runs through the entirety of the Jewish tradition. Or, as Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver put it, the Jewish ethical impulse challenges us to hunger and to thirst after righteousness, to relieve the oppressed, to proclaim liberty, and to establish peace in the world. So on this day of decision, let us come to realize that the real necessaries of life are found in the love of family, in the fidelity of friends, in the comfort of the home and the hearth, and the gifts of the human spirit triumphant. For the essence of real living is found in an unyielding conviction that we are all capable not only of choosing life, but of making the most of it. Uvacharta b'chayim lema'an tichyeh. Therefore, choose life that you may live. And to this, we can only add, Tichle shana v'kileloteha v'tachel shana uvirechoteha. May the hurt and heartache leave with the year that has ended, and may a new year of blessing and bounty begin for one and all. Amen.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavarach, Baruch Adonai hamavarach leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mechol hayamim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Adonai Elohechem, rashechem shiftechem, ziknechem v'shotrechem, kol ish Yisrael. Tapechem nishechem v'gercha asher bekerev machanecha mechotei veitzecha ahad shoev meimecha leovrecha bivrit Adonai Elohecha uvalato Asher Adonai Elohecha koreti macha hayom leman hakimotecha hayom lo leam vehu yihye lecha leElohim ka'asher diber lach ve'ka'asher nishba lavotecha L'Avraham, liYitzchak, uLiYaakov. V'lo itechem, levarechem, anochi, koret et habrit hazot, v'et ha'alah hazot. Ki et asher yeshno po, Imanu omed hayom lifnei Adonai Eloheinu ve'et asher einenu po imanu hayom. Amen. Ki hamitzvah hazot asher Anochi mitzavecha hayom lo nifleit hi mimacha velo rechoka hi lo vashamayim hi lemor mi ya'ale lanu hashamayma v'ikacheha lanu v'yashmienu otaha v'naasena v'lo me'ever layam hi lemor mi ya'avor lanu el hever hayam v'ikacheha lanu v'yashmienu otaha v'naasena כי קרוב אליך הדבר מאוד בפיך ולבבך לעשותו. אמן. ראה נתתי לפניך היום את החיים ואת הטוב, את המוות ואת הרע, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, ללכת בדרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו וחוקותיו ומשפטיו, וחיית ורבית וברכך אדוני אלוהיך בארץ אשר אתה שמה לרשתה. ואם יפנה לבבך ולא תשמע ונידחת והשתחווית לאלוהים אחרים ועבדתם, הגדתי לכם היום כי עובד תאבדון, לא תאריכון ימים על האדמה אשר אתה עובר את הידין לבוא שמה לרשתה. העידותי בכם היום את השמיים ואת הארץ, החיים והמוות נתתי לפניך, הברכה והקללה, ובחרת בחיים למען תחיה אתה וזרעך. לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, לשמוע בקולו ולדוב קבו, כי הוא חייך ואורך ימיך, לשבת על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, לתת להם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'hayei olam nota betohenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zola, for your words of wisdom and your powerful Torah reading. With the living Torah in front of us, we think about those who are in need of healing in body, mind, and spirit. We call to mind all those who are in hospital beds, in nursing facilities, in their own homes. Those of us struggling with deep grief and loneliness, with addiction, with the many seen and unseen illnesses that afflict all of our lives. In that same breath, we also think about those who remind us of healing and wholeness in this world. Doctors and nurses and therapists and caregivers and family and friends. If there's someone in your life or yourself who is in need of healing in body, mind, and spirit, take a moment and say that name out loud now. We include all of us in healing because the journey toward wholeness is long and we all have a part to play in it. We'll continue on page 271 with our Mishaberach prayer. Mishaberach Avotenu ve'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, ve'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, Hu yevarech v'rapeh et hacholim ha'eleh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimaleh rachamim aleihem, lahachli imam v'fatam v'chazikam u'lachal ye'otam, v'yishlach lehem aher refuah shlema, b'toch sha'ar hacholim, refuat ha'nefesh, refuat ha'guf, hashta b'galav v'zman kariv, v'nomar. Amen.
Mi shebeirach avoteinu b'kor habracha le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi shebeirach imotenu l'kor habracha l'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We continue on page 353. Ki lekach tov natati lechem torati al ta'azovu. A precious teaching I have given you, my Torah. Do not forsake it. A tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who embrace it know happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Take us back, Adonai. Let us come back to you. Renew in our times the days of old. We continue with our Haftarah, our readings from the prophets. On Yom Kippur, we read from Isaiah 58. And it's really interesting to me because after talking about how we need to fast and repent and do all these different things, we get to Isaiah who says, I don't want whatever you're doing over there. I don't want your fasting. I don't want your rending your garments. What I want is action. What I want is justice in this world. Are you doing that? And so we're supposed to be reading this really interesting text as we're doing the exact same things that he's criticizing us for. And I think the hope is that you do both. You pray, you fast, you meditate, you find meaning, and then you go do it in the world. So as we enter on page 277 with our Haftarah, please hold those words and that tension in mind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim veratza v'divrehem hanemarim bemet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'invi'eh ha'emet v'tzedek.
Is this the fast I desire, a day to afflict body and soul, bowing your head like a reed, covering yourself with sackcloth and ashes? Do you call this a fast, a day worthy of the favor of Adonai? Is not this the fast I desire, to break the bonds of injustice and remove the heavy yoke, to let the oppressed go free and release all those enslaved? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to take the homeless poor into your home and never to neglect your own flesh and blood? Then shall your light burst forth like the dawn, and your wounds shall quickly heal. Your righteous one leading the way before you, the presence of Adonai guarding you from behind. Then, when you call, Adonai will answer, and when you cry, will respond, I am here. If you remove the chains of oppression, the menacing hand, the malicious word, if you offer your compassion to the hungry and satisfy the suffering, then shall your light shine through the darkness, and your night become bright as noon. Adonai will guide you always, slake your thirst in parched places, give strength to your bones. You shall be like a well-watered garden, an unfailing spring.
We continue on page 280. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol ha'olamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el haneman ha'omer ve'oseh, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה, ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, למליכה ולזחילה, ולכפרה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך, ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך, בפי כוחך תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה, אדוני, מלך מוחל וצולח לעבודותינו, לעוונות עמו בית ישראל, ומעריך אשמותינו בכל שנה ששנה. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
This next prayer is an embodiment of everything our nation stands for. It reflects what's good in America. It is a prayer of hope. It is a composite of liturgy, the Constitution of the United States of America, and the Declaration of Independence. A year ago, we reflected on the problems facing our country: political divisions, civil discourse, disparities in financial, cultural, educational differences between people, equality, opportunity, and our quality of life. Unfortunately, these events in the past year have not solved our problems, and in fact, they have made them even worse. We are a nation divided. We are not a nation united, and America today is in crisis. We are all part of these problems, and we are all part of the solution. We are all in this together. We can do better because we are better, and this is not who we are. We persevere. We go forward, hoping that the coming year shall show progress and that we will become a nation united. Join with me in reciting this prayer for the coming new year. God of holiness, we hear your message. Justice, justice. You shall pursue, God of freedom. God of freedom, we hear your charge. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity, and let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of home among the nations. May our actions reflect compassion for all people, within our boundaries and abroad. May our leaders and officials embody the vision of our founders to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We pray for courage and conscience, and we aim to support our country's highest values and aspirations, the hard-won rights that define us as a people, and for all who serve our country with selfless devotion, in peace and in war, from fields of battle to clinics and classrooms, from government to grassroots, all those whose noble deeds and sacrifice benefit our nation and our world. We are grateful for the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our founders ascribed to you, our Creator. We pray for their wisdom and moral strength, that we may be guardians of those rights for ourselves and for the sake of all people, now and forever.
All of the words in the Ashamnu prayer are plural tense. And the reason that nu is at the end, that plural tense, is because we're all responsible for what happens in that word. It's an acrostic prayer, A through Z, or Aleph through Tav, of saying, in our world, this has happened, and this has happened, and this has happened. Whether it is murder, or pollution, or something that you've done in your heart, that if one human has done it, then all of us are responsible. And so what we do is we knock on our hearts during that time, and we repeat. We say Ashamnu, together we say Ashamnu back. And what you're doing right here is not beating yourself up about it. You're saying, I'm knocking on my heart, asking my heart to open up, saying, hello, heart, I've closed this door to you. And with this, by taking collective responsibility with what's happened in our world, we're saying, as my heart opens up, I can say I'm sorry, and I can forgive myself, and I can forgive other humans, and therefore I can move forward. So with that, we continue with our Ashamnu prayer.
Ay 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 ay. Ay 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 ay. Ashamnu, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Gazalnu, Bidardu dofi, Dibardu dofi. Ay 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 ay. Hey vinu, hey vinu, vehir shanu, vehir shanu, zadnu, zadnu, chamasnu, chamasnu. Tafalnu shaker, tafalnu shaker. Ay 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 ay. Ma'at nura, ma'at nura. Kizavnu, kizavnu. Latnu, latnu. Maradnu, maradnu. Kishinu oref.
Kishinu oref.
Ay, 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 ay. Rashanu.
Rashanu.
Shicharnu.
Shicharnu.
Tayavnu.
Tiavnu.
Tzainu.
Tzainu.
Titanu.
Titanu.
For the sin we committed against you through evading and avoiding, because we could not face the truth. For our flight into hypocrisy and deception, because we did not dare to speak it. For the facts we dissembled and all we glossed over. For the excesses we made, for feeding our bodies and starving our souls. For interfering with the souls of others and neglecting their needs. For shifting our responsibilities, for reproaches and recriminations. For our foolishness, our folly, and false standards. For seeing these things only in others and never in ourselves. For complacency, which blinds us, and our self-righteousness, which lessens us. For calculating kindness and measuring out pity. For charity that is cold and prayers without feeling. For withholding our love, for the appeals that we ignored, and the people whom we refused. For the affection which died, and our lives that became bitter. For the visions which faded, the ideals we neglected, and the opportunities we lost.
Al chet shechotanu lefanecha be'ones uvratzon, the ways we have wronged you under duress and by choice. Ve'al chet shechotanu lefanecha be'yodim uvlo yodim, and harm we have caused in your world consciously and unconsciously. Al chet shechotanu lefanecha bivli da'at, the ways we have wronged you through our thoughtlessness. Ve'al chet shechotanu lefanecha biritzat raglayim lahara, and harm we have caused in your world through impulsive acts of malice. Al chet shechotanu lefanecha bechozek yad, the ways we have wronged you by abusing our power. Ve'al chet shechotanu lefanecha bizilzul horim urim, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. Al chet shechotanu lefanecha beyetzer hara, the ways we have wronged you by giving into our hostile impulses. Ve'al chet shechotanu lefanecha bekashyut oref, and harm we have caused in your world through inflexibility and stubbornness. Al chet shechotanu lefanecha bechachash uvchazav, the ways we have wronged you through lies and deceits. Ve'al chet shechotanu lefanecha bekalut rosh, and harm we have caused in your world by making light of serious matters. Al chet shechotanu lefanecha b'siach shoftotenu, the ways we have wronged you in our routine conversations. Ve'al chet shechotanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin, and harm we have caused in your world through envy. Ve'al kulam Elohai slichot, salach lanu, mechal lanu, kapar lanu. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, and grant us atonement.
Val kulam Elohai slichot, silach lanu, michal lanu, kapelanu.
A brief reminder before we conclude today. This is a fast day, but God doesn't ask us to fast until we're sick, or want us to suffer, or risk our health in pursuit of a fast. Fasting's for the soul. It's for you, not God, to help us concentrate on what's important in our souls rather than focus on the traditional, physical, earthly needs of our bodies. If fasting from food is not healthy for you, just try abdicating from something else for the day. Just find a place to be focused and mindful, but don't suffer. Got it? Good. As we conclude this morning's service, a brief reminder that the fun of Yom Kippur doesn't end with this service. Stay tuned for small group learnings and engagement opportunities throughout our day. And then jump back on with us for live streaming through our website at www.templesholom.net at 5 p.m. for our afternoon Yom Kippur service, 6 p.m. for our Yizkor service, and 7 p.m. for our closing Ne'ilah service. Finally, before we turn to our closing song, I'd like to thank all of you who helped make today possible. Our readers, our musicians, the incredible talent of Dr. Mark Bailey, the exquisite voice of Dr. Allison Acord, the artistry of our video team and Robert at Wales Films, Error at the Blank Press, our impeccable sound team of Clark and Rich of Monastery Studios, Rabbi Gary Zola. Thank you also to the staff team of Temple Sholom who put their heart into all that we do. And also, especially to you who showed up and tuned in for this service, who we did all of this for. Because Temple Sholom believes that we need you in our world. And our offering at Temple Sholom is to connect with people wherever you are, physically, spiritually, and offer a space for courageous belonging and meaning. Thank you for being a part of that. If you're already part of the Temple Sholom community, thank you. If you're not, well, you are now. So send us an email, drop us a message, or call us to learn more about Temple Sholom and how to become more involved. We'll continue our service on page 316 with Shema Kolenu.
Varachem, Alenu.
I'd like to offer you a blessing, the ancient priestly benediction of our people. So you can put your hands out, you can put your hands on your head like maybe your parents did. You can take a knee, because Berach, knee, and Baruch, blessing, come from the same root. It's about submission to God. It's about deciding that you don't want to take the systems that are unjust. Whatever works for you, just put your hands out, put your hands on your knees, whatever works for you to feel like you can receive blessing in this moment.
Yevarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha Shalom 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 v'yasem lecha Shalom Shalom v'yasem lecha Shalom 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 v'yasem lecha Shalom Shalom v'yasem lecha Shalom.
May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And when God's light does shine upon you, may it bring you strength and courage and goodwill to go out into this world and do good, because we need you exactly as you are. Take care of yourself. Gemar Chatima Tova. May it be an easy fast of well-being, and may it be sealed in the book of life.
Yevarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha Yisa